Hi guys, this is Mr. C. Welcome back to part 2. Now we're gonna move forward with the tracing part of the echo art. So here I have a picture of myself, a extra piece of paper, and now what we're gonna do is we're gonna trace the outline of the picture onto the blank piece of paper. So there's many ways you could do this. If you just have the picture on the computer, you could place your blank piece of paper onto the computer and trace onto the computer. But of course, be very careful as it is a screen. If you apply too much pressure, you could break the screen. Another thing you can do to trace your outline is to cut out your outline and then trace it onto a piece of paper. What I'm going to do today is use a light box I constructed from stuff at my house. So a light box is usually, a box or a flat piece of white acrylic paper, acrylic sheet, and it has a light underneath it, and it makes tracing really easy. But what I'm gonna do with the stuff that I have at home, since I don't have a lighted box, is I'm gonna use one of these. Your parents use these to cook. They're usually made out of glass. If you do have another one that's see-through, you could use that as well. If you are going to use a glass one, be very careful that it doesn't break, that you don't knock it off the table. Ask your parents for permission before you do that. If not, try the other methods to do the artwork instead before, touching glass or working with glass, because it can break and you can hurt yourself. So without further ado, I'll show you how I made my light box. So the way I created my light box was really simple. I placed the cooking tray face up, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn my phone on and I'm gonna have it underneath the cooking tray, so it's gonna be pointing straight up. I'm gonna try to put it in the middle, and that way I'm going to be able to place my photo as well as my tracing sheet. And as you can see, I'm going to be able to trace my picture pretty easily compared to having no light box. You can see it's really hard to see it, and if I were to just have it on a blank surface, even if I try to put light on it from different angles from the side, it would be really hard to do so. So again, just gonna place my phone upside down. Oh, make sure the flash is on so I can trace it. Put the cooking tray down. Try to put it towards the middle a little bit more. There we go. Then I'm gonna place my drawing and my picture on here. I'm gonna try to level this out. Since my hand got cut off in the picture, I'm going to try to have that all the way towards the very edge of it. That way I could have it go up. And then I'll just draw the top part of my head since it's missing. So I'll start off with a pencil. Draw this part right here. On my elbow, my shirt. Should have been the outline, so I shouldn't have drawn even this. Again, mistakes are part of learning. That's what we're here for. Draw the outside. And again, it's okay if you do go out a little past the lines, because we'll go over the outline in the final phase with marker. Right here. And this is, as you can see, the light is getting a little bit less, so you could move it up a bit more. And I'm going to move the paper downward just so I could focus on the head a bit more. Curly parts of my beard. Move this up towards the side now. I think I might actually leave his little area right here. I kind of like that because then I'll be able to color it in. Okay, moving forward. I'm going to completely omit the chair in a little bit. I say omit the chair because I don't want the chair to show up. If for some reason you do want a chair to show up in your drawing, that's fine as well. It's kind of hard to look at it right here. Okay, I believe that's it for my outline. So now we're gonna move this over to the side. I'm gonna have my light turned off now. And we're gonna have my drawing out. So this is now what we're going to be working with for the rest of the process. If you are using the cooking tray that's made out of glass and you did use your phone to make this, now would be a good time to put it away as you will not be needing it anymore. Make sure you do keep the picture that you took. If you decided to trace it the way I did, that's fine as well, still keep it. If you decided to cut it out, make sure you have a scrap piece of paper so you could write down the ideas for the layers that are going to come up next. So now what we're going to do is retouch up these lines, make them a little darker with the pencil, and then we're going to go over them with the marker. So I want to finalize my lines. And make sure they look exactly the way I want them to look before I continue with the following portion. So basically clean out the edges so that everything is really smooth. I'm going to fix this inner area as well. So usually if you're going around corners, it helps to make this motion because you're continuing to go smooth. If you do need to rotate the paper to continue with that circle, depending on what you're sketching out, it's a good idea to continue with it instead of working at a weird angle to try to get what you want. Because not only is it going to be uncomfortable, but it'll translate into your work as well. So now I'm going to go back in and erase anything that is being left over we don't necessarily need, or that I don't necessarily want to include. Okay. Little extra lines. Okay, I think I'm at a good spot. So now what I'm going to do is I'm gonna overlay it now with the marker. So I'm gonna use a fine tip marker to really accentuate those little tiny lines, and that way it gives me more space to expound outwards. So I'm gonna start with this as well. And since the pencil is a little bit thicker, I'm going to go over the marker and actually fill in those lines really well, because the marker is a little bit thinner, but I do want the line and definition of the pencil. I'm going to go back and make it as smooth as possible. Again, if you're working on something like I am, it's probably a good idea to have, especially if you're using a marker, something underneath the marker so you do not mark the wood underneath it or whatever it is you're working with. Should have mentioned that beforehand, but good thing I did not. Stain the wood underneath. Here we go. As you can see, some of the lines are a little jagged. I'm going to try to go back over with the really thin marker. Smooth them out with the rest of them. So it does seem a little bit better. Now we're going to go over to the smaller one. It's best to start with the smaller ones, that way you get an idea for how either the thin tip marker or the thicker marker works, and that way you could apply what you've learned in those smaller areas to the bigger areas. So obviously if you're working with a smaller area, it's better to use a thin tip marker, and bigger area, it's better to use a thicker tip marker. Because in the thinner areas, you'll be able to get a lot more detail, and in the thicker areas, you'll be able to fill in the detail a lot faster as you might need it. Okay, that one came out pretty well without needing to follow up with anything. Again, don't just place the paper over. If you're doing edges, it's good to have a bit of an overlay so that if you do go over, you go over onto the paper underneath instead of, again, on the surface that you're working on. Again, this is that motion I was talking about. Make sure your hand's free to do what it needs to do. That way it doesn't create any weird problems when you're painting or drawing. Again, if the marker's too thin, make sure you smooth it out so that the lines are really smooth and well flowing without any jagged lines. Again, if it creates a jagged edge, continue and smooth it out. You're going to continue. Again, the edge, just in case you do go over. There you go. So now that we have this, we're going to be able to go around the outside area and create the layers I was talking about.